For 19 years, I was both father and mother to my daughter, Bailey. Her mother left when Bailey was barely 1 year old to be with her new family. At 24, my daughter moved in with them because they had a pool and a 3-car garage. When she graduated with her MBA, she asked me not to attend because I didn't fit the image she was trying to project. When I confronted her about it, she said something that still wakes me up at night. I changed my last name because I was ashamed of carrying yours. Those words changed everything forever. But let me tell you the whole story, because what my daughter didn't know was that with that decision, she had just given up much more than a factory worker's last name. You know how it feels when someone you've built your entire life around suddenly tells you that you're an embarrassment? That's exactly what happened to me. And if you've ever worked your ass off for someone who couldn't care less about your sacrifices, you'll understand every word of what I'm about to tell you. It all started 19 years ago. When Bailey was barely 1 year old, her mother, Jessica, decided that the life of a wife and mother to a Ford assembly line worker wasn't for her. One morning, she simply packed her things and left me a note on the kitchen table, saying she had found someone who could give her the life she deserved. Someone with money, someone with a future. That someone was Richard Kane, owner of Kane Luxury Auto, a chain of BMW and Mercedes dealerships across Michigan. A man who could offer her the mansion in Grosse Pointe, European vacations, designer everything. All the things that I, a 29-year-old line worker at the Ford Rouge plant, couldn't provide on a union salary. I was left alone with Bailey, a baby who could barely walk, who cried for her mama every night for months. Let me tell you something about being a single father in 1999. There wasn't exactly a handbook for guys like me. I knew nothing about taking care of children, nothing about making baby food, changing diapers at 3 a.m., or what to do when she had a fever and the pediatrician's answering service wasn't picking up. My brother Logan helped as much as he could. He was 3 years older than me, and his son Caleb had been born just 6 months before Bailey. Logan was always the more practical of the two of us, the kind of guy who read instruction manuals and actually followed directions. That same week, Jessica left. He took me to Walmart for everything I needed for the baby. "Listen, Aaron," he said, as he loaded the cart with formula and diapers, his voice carrying that no bullshit tone I'd grown up with. "This is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. That woman left because she didn't want responsibilities. Don't expect her to come back and help." He was right, as always. Jessica would call every 3 or 4 months, usually around holidays. She'd talk to Bailey for 5 minutes, promise to visit soon, and then disappear again like smoke. For birthdays and Christmases, she sent expensive gifts. American Girl dolls, brand new bikes, the latest gaming systems. Everything I couldn't afford on my line worker's salary. Meanwhile, I juggled 3 jobs to make ends meet. You think building cars is hard work? Try building a life for a little girl when you're starting from scratch. I worked my shifts at Ford, taught math tutoring to high school kids in the evenings, and did electrical and plumbing work for neighbors on weekends. All so Bailey could have what she needed. Go to a decent school, have nice clothes, and show up to birthday parties with a gift in her hands instead of empty-handed excuses. I sold my Mustang, the one thing I'd bought for myself after getting hired at Ford, and bought a practical used Silverado. We moved from our cramped apartment to a 3-bedroom ranch house in Lincoln Park, so Bailey could have her own room and a backyard to play in. I stopped going out with my buddies from the plant, stopped playing in the weekend softball league, stopped doing everything that single guys my age did. But you know what? I didn't regret it. Not one damn minute of it. Every morning when Bailey hugged me before school, her little arms wrapped around my neck like I was her whole world. Every afternoon when she'd run to the window when she heard my truck in the driveway. Every night when she asked me to read her a story. I knew it was all worth it. Those were the good years when she still looked at me like I was her hero. When she'd bring her friends over and proudly introduce me as my daddy who fixes everything. When she'd fall asleep in my lap watching Disney movies on Friday nights, and I'd carry her to bed thinking I was the luckiest man alive. Logan always warned me, though. "Aaron, that girl's getting spoiled. You give her everything she asks for. One day she's going to cause you problems." His son Caleb, on the other hand, was completely different from the start. He was a calm, respectful kid who always treated me with kindness. "Uncle Aaron," he'd say when he came over, "can I help you fix that sink? Want me to help carry in the groceries?" Even as a little kid, Caleb understood that work meant something, that effort deserved respect. Caleb and Bailey played together when they were little, but as they grew up, the difference became obvious. Bailey always wanted what she didn't have. She always complained that our house was small, that my truck was old, that we couldn't take vacations like the families of her friends from the private school I was killing myself working to pay for. The neighbors saw it all. Mrs. Rodriguez next door would shake her head and say, "Aaron, that little girl is never satisfied with anything. You work yourself to the bone and she always has something to complain about." But I defended her every time. "It's just a phase," I'd tell them. "All teenagers are like this." Deep down, though, I was starting to worry that maybe Logan was right. The years flew by faster than I expected. Before I knew it, Bailey was in high school, and the sweet little girl who used to wait for me by the window had turned into someone I barely recognized. She'd developed this attitude, like everything I provided wasn't quite good enough, like she was settling for less than she deserved. Any father reading this will understand the slow heartbreak of watching your child grow ashamed of you. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process, like watching paint fade in the sun. One day you're their hero, and the next day you're just adequate. Bailey graduated from high school with honors, and I was proud as hell. I took time off work to attend the ceremony, wearing the best suit I owned, the same navy one I'd bought 3 years earlier for Logan's wedding. When they called her name, I stood up and cheered louder than any parent there. She looked embarrassed by my enthusiasm, but I didn't care. My daughter was going to college. University of Michigan accepted her into their business program. The tuition alone was more money than I'd ever seen in one place. But I was determined to make it work. I picked up extra shifts at Ford, expanded my tutoring business to include weekends, and started taking on bigger plumbing and electrical jobs. Some weeks I barely saw daylight, except through the factory windows. You know what it's like working 60-hour weeks to pay for someone else's dreams? Your back aches, your hands are permanently stained with grease and solder, and you fall asleep in your work clothes more nights than you'd like to admit. But every time I deposited another tuition payment, I told myself it would all be worth it when Bailey graduated and started her career. During those university years, Jessica started showing up more often. She'd drive up in Richard's latest BMW or Mercedes, always something new and shiny, and take Bailey to lunch at expensive restaurants in Ann Arbor. She'd buy her designer clothes from shops I couldn't even afford to walk into and tell her about the new additions to their Grosse Pointe mansion. "Dad," Bailey would say after these visits, "Mom showed me pictures of their new wine cellar. It's bigger than our entire living room." "That's nice, honey. How are your classes going?" "They're fine. But Dad, did you know Richard has a boat? Like a real yacht. They're taking it to Mackinac Island next weekend." I'd nod and smile, but inside I was wondering when my daughter started measuring love by the size of someone's boat. When did the father who worked 3 jobs become less impressive than the stepfather with a yacht? The worst part was watching Bailey's friends when they'd come over. These kids from wealthy families would look around our modest living room, like they were visiting a museum exhibit about how poor people lived. Bailey noticed their reactions, and I could see her mentally cataloging everything that wasn't quite good enough. "Dad," she said one evening during her sophomore year, "my friend Madison's dad owns 3 restaurants. Her family has a summer house in Traverse City." "That's nice, sweetheart. What would you like for dinner? Can we order pizza? Madison's family eats out every night." It was always comparisons, always what we didn't have instead of appreciation for what we did have. I'd built us a decent life, not rich, but comfortable. We had a roof over our heads, food on the table, and I'd never missed a single tuition payment. But to Bailey, it was starting to feel like not enough. Logan saw what was happening before I did. "Aaron," he told me one Sunday when we were watching the Lions game, "that girl's losing perspective. All she talks about is money and status symbols. She's just figuring out what she wants in life," I defended her. "College exposes kids to different possibilities." "Bullshit. Caleb's in college too, and he's not coming home complaining about what we don't have. Last week he thanked me for teaching him how to change his own oil instead of paying someone to do it." That was the difference between our boys. Caleb understood the value of work, the satisfaction of fixing things with your own hands. He was studying mechanical engineering, but he still helped me with weekend projects and never acted like manual labor was beneath him. "You remember when you taught me to wire that outlet?" Caleb asked one Saturday while we were installing new fixtures in Mrs. Rodriguez's kitchen. "That skill saved me $200 when I moved into my dorm." "That's what family does," I told him. "We teach each other useful things." Bailey, on the other hand, had started acting like my practical skills were embarrassing. When her friends came over, she'd usher them quickly past my tool shed, past the Silverado with its dented bumper and faded paint, straight into the house where they could pretend we were just like their families. Junior year, things got worse. Jessica started including Bailey in their social events, charity galas, country club dinners, networking parties, where Richard rubbed elbows with Michigan's business elite. Bailey would come home from these events practically glowing with excitement. "Dad, I met a bank president tonight. His son goes to Northwestern and he's going to intern at Goldman Sachs this summer." "That sounds impressive. How was the food?" "It was amazing. 5 courses and they had servers for everything." Richard knows so many successful people. Successful people. Like success was measured only by the size of your bank account or the prestige of your zip code. Like 19 years of steady employment, home ownership, and never missing a single one of her school events somehow didn't count as success. But I kept my mouth shut and kept writing the tuition checks. Bailey graduated from University of Michigan with a business degree, and I was bursting with pride. 4 years of sacrifice, 4 years of 70-hour work weeks, 4 years of eating ramen so she could eat in dining halls, and my daughter had done it. She was the first Mitchell to graduate from college. I took a personal day from Ford and drove to Ann Arbor for the ceremony. I'd bought a new tie for the occasion and even got my hair cut at an actual barbershop instead of doing it myself. When they called Bailey Mitchell to receive her diploma, I stood up and applauded until my hands hurt. But when I found her afterward, she seemed distant, distracted. "Thanks for coming, Dad," she said, but her eyes were scanning the crowd for someone else. "Sweetheart, I'm so proud of you. We did it." She looked at me strangely. "We did it? Well, you did the hard work, but..." "Dad, I need to talk to you about something. I'm applying for MBA programs." More school meant more money, but if that's what she wanted, I'd find a way. "That's great, honey. Michigan has a good program, right?" "Actually, I got accepted to Northwestern, full ride." I should have been thrilled. Instead, something cold settled in my stomach. Northwestern was in Chicago, hours away from home. "How did you manage a full scholarship?" Richard wrote a recommendation letter. He knows people on the admissions board. Richard. Always Richard. "Well, that's wonderful. I'm proud of you." What I didn't say was how it felt to know that my 19 years of sacrifice mattered less than one phone call from a rich man I barely knew. Bailey moved to Chicago for graduate school, and our phone calls became less frequent. When she did call, it was usually to tell me about some networking event or internship opportunity that Richard had arranged. Never about her classes, never about missing home, never asking how I was doing. "Dad, Richard got me an interview with a consulting firm. They only hire from Ivy League schools, but he knows the managing partner." "That's great, sweetheart. How are you liking Chicago?" "It's amazing. So much more sophisticated than Detroit. People here really understand business. Sophisticated. Like Detroit, the city that built America, the city where generations of Mitchells had worked honest jobs, was somehow primitive by comparison. During her second year of graduate school, something shifted. Bailey's calls became even more infrequent, and when we did talk, she seemed embarrassed by any mention of her life in Michigan. "How's work at the plant?" she'd ask, like she was inquiring about a distant relative's health. "Same as always, steady work, good benefits. We're retooling for the new F-150 line." "That's nice, Dad. Listen, I have to run. I'm meeting some classmates for dinner in the Gold Coast." The Gold Coast. She'd started dropping names of expensive neighborhoods like breadcrumbs, little reminders of how far she'd traveled from Lincoln Park. Then came the graduation announcement for her MBA. This time, the invitation was formal, printed on heavy cardstock with gold lettering. It looked more like a wedding invitation than a graduation announcement. I was excited, thinking I'd finally be part of another milestone moment in my daughter's life. I went to Macy's and bought the best suit they had, navy blue with a subtle pinstripe that the salesman said was very professional. I even bought new dress shoes and a silk tie to match. Logan helped me pick out a gift for her graduation, a beautiful leather portfolio with her initials embossed in gold. "Aaron," he said as we looked at it in the store, "Bailey's going to love this. It shows you believe in her future." I spent almost $800 that day, money I really couldn't afford. But it was my daughter's MBA graduation. You don't put a price tag on moments like that. What I didn't know was that 3 days before the graduation, I would receive an email that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my daughter. The email came on a Tuesday night. I was watching the Tigers lose to Cleveland when my phone buzzed. I saw Bailey's name and felt that familiar flutter of joy. We hadn't talked in almost a month, but it wasn't a call. It was an email, a cold, formal email like something you'd send to a business associate you barely knew. Dad, I need to discuss the graduation ceremony with you. After careful consideration, I think it would be best if you didn't attend. The event is very formal, and Richard's business associates will be there with their families. I don't want any awkward situations that might reflect poorly on my professional networking opportunities. I hope you understand. We can celebrate privately afterward. Owen Bailey. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. I, her father, who had worked 3 jobs for 19 years to pay for her education, was an awkward situation that might hurt her professional networking. My hands were shaking when I called her. Bailey, what the hell is this email about? Dad, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's as much a networking event as a graduation. Richard knows bank presidents, Fortune 500 CEOs, venture capitalists. I need to make the right impression. And I don't make the right impression. Dad, you work in a factory. You drive a pickup truck with rust on the bumper. These people move in different circles. Different circles? Bailey, I'm your father. I raised you since you were in diapers. I paid for that expensive MBA you're about to receive. Yes, I know, and I appreciate everything you've done. But this is different. This is about my future, and Richard understands the business world in a way that you just don't. The business world. Like there was something shameful about the world that had fed us, housed us, and put her through 2 universities. I was speechless. I literally couldn't form words. After a moment that felt like an hour, I managed to ask, then why did you even tell me about the graduation? Because you're still my dad, and I thought you should know. Maybe we can celebrate privately afterward. Privately. Like I was some embarrassing family secret that needed to be hidden away. You know what, Bailey? You're absolutely right. Maybe a factory foreman who worked 3 jobs to put his daughter through graduate school doesn't belong at her MBA graduation. Maybe I should just stay home and let Richard take all the credit. Dad, don't be dramatic. I hung up. The next day after my shift, I drove straight to Jessica and Richard's mansion in Grosse Pointe. You want to talk about feeling out of place? Try pulling up to a 10,000 square foot house in a rusted Silverado when you're wearing work boots and Carhartt pants. The circular driveway had 3 luxury cars parked like trophies. A Mercedes S-Class, a BMW X7, and what looked like Richard's personal Porsche. I rang the doorbell and Jessica answered. She looked exactly the same as always, perfectly put together, like she was about to pose for a magazine cover, not a hair out of place, not a wrinkle in her designer blouse. Aaron, she said with mild surprise, what are you doing here? I'm here to talk to Bailey about this graduation situation. I don't think that's a good idea. She's very stressed with job interviews and everything. Jessica, she's my daughter. I have the right to speak with her. She sighed like I was being unreasonable and led me into the marble foyer. The house was a temple to wealth, crystal chandeliers hanging from vaulted ceilings, oil paintings that probably cost more than my annual salary, a curved staircase that looked like something from a Hollywood movie. Bailey, Jessica called up the stairs. Your father wants to talk to you. Bailey came down wearing a business suit that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. She looked annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. Dad, I already explained everything in my email. Bailey, we need to talk privately. No, whatever you want to say, you can say it here. That's when Richard appeared, tall, silver-haired, wearing a casual shirt that screamed expensive without having any visible logos. Everything about him was polished, from his perfectly trimmed beard to his Italian leather shoes. Aaron, he said, extending his hand like we were old golf buddies. Good to see you. I understand you're concerned about the graduation ceremony. I'm concerned about my daughter cutting me out of the most important day of her academic life. Well, Richard smiled that practiced politician's smile. Bailey's transitioning into her professional life now. Image matters in the business world, and she needs to think strategically about her networking opportunities. Networking opportunities? I'm her father. Of course, and that relationship is important. But I'm the one who's been guiding her through the business world. I'm the one who's opening doors for her. Career. Bailey crossed her arms and looked at me like I was being unreasonably stubborn. Dad, Richard's right. I'm not that little girl who needed you to help with math homework anymore. I'm building a professional reputation, and Richard understands that world better than you do. Better than I do? Bailey, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying that in my professional life, I need to surround myself with people who can actually help me succeed. People who understand corporate culture and high-level networking. And I'm not one of those people. She looked me straight in the eyes. There was something cold there, something I'd never seen before. Like she was looking at a stranger instead of the man who'd raised her. Dad, I need to tell you something. 6 months ago, I legally changed my last name. I don't go by Bailey Mitchell anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow. The room started spinning. My legal name is now Bailey Kane. I took Richard's last name. I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't get air into my lungs. Why? I whispered. Because when people ask about my family, when they want to know my background, I don't want them to know I come from a 3-bedroom house in Lincoln Park with a father who works on an assembly line. Every word was a knife twisting in my chest. I want them to know I'm Bailey Kane, stepdaughter of Richard Kane, the successful businessman, not Bailey Mitchell, daughter of Aaron Mitchell, the factory worker. Bailey, I said, my voice cracking, I gave up everything for you, everything. I know, Dad, and I appreciate it, but that doesn't mean I have to be defined by it forever. Defined by it. Like 19 years of love and sacrifice were something to be ashamed of. That's when something inside me broke, not just cracked, completely shattered. I turned and walked toward the door without another word. Aaron, Richard called after me, probably thinking he could smooth things over with some corporate speak. Maybe we can find a compromise here. No, I said without turning around. You heard her loud and clear. There's nothing to compromise about. I drove home in a fog. I don't remember the route or even starting my truck. What I do remember is immediately calling Logan and telling him everything, every humiliating word, every slap in the face. That ungrateful little witch, Logan said when I finished, after everything you sacrificed for her. But what none of them, not Bailey, not Jessica, not Richard, knew was that with her decision to legally change her name and publicly humiliate the man who raised her, she had just made the most expensive mistake of her life. She had just given up nearly $300,000. You see, what Bailey didn't know was that our family had been quietly building wealth for 3 generations. My grandparents, Frank and Dorothy Mitchell, had been incredibly frugal people who saved every penny they earned from their jobs at Chrysler. When they passed away, they left a trust fund specifically for the grandchild who carries the Mitchell family name with pride and honor. The exact wording mattered. The lawyers had been very specific about that. There was also the life insurance policy I'd been paying religiously for 19 years, a policy worth $85,000 with Bailey Mitchell listed as the sole beneficiary. And then there was the family cabin on Lake Huron that my father had left me, a modest but valuable property worth about $50,000 that I'd been planning to give Bailey as a wedding gift. All told, we were talking about nearly $300,000 in Mitchell family assets. All of it legally designated for Bailey Mitchell, daughter of Aaron Mitchell, but Bailey Mitchell no longer existed. She'd legally erased herself to become Bailey Kane. The next day I called our family lawyer, Mr. Peterson. He'd handled our legal affairs since I was a kid, helped my parents with their wills, guided me through the divorce paperwork when Jessica left. Aaron, he said when I explained the situation, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain about this? She legally changed her name, Bill. She told me to my face that she's ashamed to be associated with me. She cut me out of her graduation because I'm an embarrassment. This is substantial money. The trust fund, the insurance policy, the cabin. I know exactly what it's worth, and I know exactly who deserves it now. Mr. Peterson took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly, the way he always did when he was processing something serious. Who do you want as the new beneficiary? Caleb, my nephew Caleb. He carries the Mitchell name with pride, and he's been more like a son to me than my own daughter ever was. It took us 3 hours to change all the paperwork, every document, every beneficiary form, every legal designation. Caleb was now the sole heir to everything the Mitchell family had built. Logan was named as secondary beneficiary. When I left that office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not happiness exactly, but a deep sense of rightness, like I'd finally done something that made perfect sense. The years that followed were some of the best of my adult life. I met Andrea, a high school math teacher, at a community education meeting where I was teaching a financial literacy class. She was smart, kind, down to earth. Everything I'd forgotten I wanted in a partner. "Aaron," she told me after we'd been dating for 8 months, "I love that you work with your hands. I love that you fix things instead of throwing them away. You're a real man, not some corporate fake." Caleb, meanwhile, had graduated with his engineering degree and landed a job with a manufacturing company in Dearborn. He visited every Sunday for dinner, always asking if I needed help with projects around the house, always treating Andrea with respect. Uncle Aaron, he'd say every visit, "Thank you for being like a second father to me. I know Dad would be proud of how you've looked out for me." When Logan passed away from a sudden heart attack 3 years later, Caleb and I became even closer. The three of us, me, Andrea, and Caleb, felt like the family I'd always wanted but never quite had. When Caleb turned 22, I decided to tell him about the inheritance. I took him to dinner at a nice steakhouse, somewhere we could talk privately without interruption. "Caleb," I said after our steaks arrived, "I need to tell you something important about our family finances." "Is everything okay, Uncle?" "Better than okay. Do you remember when Bailey changed her name and cut ties with the family?" "How could I forget? I still don't understand how she could treat you like that after everything you did for her." "Well, when she made that decision, it had some legal consequences she didn't know about." I explained everything: the trust fund, the insurance policy, the cabin, all of it now legally his. Caleb was quiet for several minutes, staring at his plate. Finally, he looked up with tears in his eyes. "Uncle Aaron, this is life-changing money. Are you absolutely sure about this?" "Caleb, you've never been ashamed of where you come from. You've never acted like manual labor was beneath you. You carry the Mitchell name with honor, and you treat me with respect. Of course I'm sure." "Thank you," he said, his voice cracking. "But more than the money, thank you for teaching me what family really means." 4 years later, the automotive recession hit Michigan hard. Luxury car sales dropped through the floor, and Richard's dealership empire started crumbling. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they'd had to mortgage the Grosse Pointe mansion to try to save the business. Meanwhile, Caleb had used part of his inheritance to buy a house in Dearborn. Andrea and I had gotten married and were planning our retirement. I'd been promoted to plant supervisor, and life was good. Then one Friday evening, exactly 5 years after Bailey had cut me out of her graduation, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years. Bailey. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "Hello," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Dad," she said, and I could hear the desperation immediately. "It's me." "Hello, Bailey." "Dad, I need to talk to you. We're in serious trouble. Richard lost everything. The dealerships are bankrupt. We lost the house. Adrian left me when the money ran out. I'm working at a call center just to pay rent on a studio apartment." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Dad, I know things between us ended badly. I know I hurt you. But I need your help, financial help, just until I can get back on my feet." "Bailey, I don't have that kind of money to lend. Please, Dad, I know you've always been careful with money. You must have some savings." "And why would I help you?" "Because I'm your daughter. Because despite everything that happened, I'm still your blood." Your blood. After she'd legally changed her name to erase any connection to me. "Bailey, do you remember what you told me the last time we spoke?" "Dad, I was young and stupid. I made mistakes. You told me you were ashamed to carry my name. I didn't mean it like that. You cut me out of your graduation because I was an embarrassment. Dad, please. I understand now that I was wrong. I understand that you were always my real father. Richard abandoned me the minute his money was gone. You never would have done that." "You're right. I never would have abandoned you, but you abandoned me." "Dad, give me a chance to make this right." "Bailey, do you know what you lost when you changed your name?" "What do you mean?" "I mean the trust fund our grandparents left for the grandchild who carries the Mitchell name with pride. $150,000. Complete silence. "I mean the life insurance policy I paid for 19 years. $85,000. Dad, I mean the cabin on Lake Huron that was going to be your wedding gift, worth about $50,000. Please tell me you didn't give it all to Caleb. Yes, I did, because Caleb values the Mitchell name. Dad, please, can I change my name back? Can we fix this? Change it back for money? That's exactly what I expected you to say. It's not just about money. Bailey, I hope you find happiness in life, but you won't find it through the Mitchell family because you chose not to be part of it. And I hung up. As I write this today, Caleb and his wife Sarah just welcomed their first child, a son they're naming Aaron Mitchell Kane in honor of both sides of their family. The Mitchell name continues, carried by someone who understands that family isn't about money or status. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people live with the consequences of their choices. Bailey chose status over family. She got exactly what she chose and lost everything that actually mattered.